Hello, everybody. Sorry for the slight delay there. We are now ready to go. Nick, I'm going to hand over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Abby. First of all, a huge welcome to everyone who's taken the time out to join us this evening. If you're a new member, then welcome. I hope you enjoy it. If you're a returning member, we must have done something correct in the past. First of all, I should say this whole presentation is being recorded. So if you have any issue with that, I guess you should bunk out now. So welcome, everyone. And if you don't know, what is MainframerZ? Well, a while ago, around November 2018, we saw a gap. There was no meetup. And in these days, of course, meetups were face-to-face, and there was no meetup group for mainframers. So we thought we would create one. So there was a group of us. We created one. We had the first one in November 2018. And we were running these events pretty much once a quarter. It was based around London. And with recent events, with the COVID virus, we've now gone virtual, which means that we can reach a global community. So this community has become much wider than just the local London people. And there's a group of us. We're always looking for new partners, new clients to join us in the organization. You'll see a slide on that later on. We're a community of nearly 700 at the moment, and we're continuing to grow. So that is really what Mainframe is about. And this is the team that have got together. This is our merry band of helpers. And there are plenty of tasks to go around, and that sort of helps relieve the burden on putting all the effort on one person. So who knows, your face could fit in here. So there's numerous ways to find us. We're on the actual meetup main section. We've got Slack channel dedicated to mainframers. We're on LinkedIn, and we're on Twitter, and those are the various handles that you can communicate with us. Now, we would really like to expand our little community. So if you would like to join our mainframers team, or you just want to participate in a future event, there are a lot of ways that you can do it. And we've tried to lay out here the kind of time commitments that you're giving yourself up to, depending upon how you go about it. So this is very much not an IBM organized thing. We want real users, and we want you to have a say in the direction of the community. So why not join the organization committee? Or when we stop doing virtual events, we're looking for venues to host these again, and looking for sponsors for supplying refreshments and things. And we would love to have more presentations from real users of your experiences with the mainframe. And this is, as we said, it's very much around a mainframe community. So if you'd like to be a speaker or even host the event yourself, we'd love to hear from you. And you can see that the commitment really is pretty minimal, depending upon what you do. And actually, it's quite a lot of fun. So at this point, I'd like to just suggest that you prepare a browser device, because we're going to have a little game in a few minutes, and you will need to have two screens going in some way. So today's speakers, we've got a veritable cornucopia of speakers today. We have someone from the east coast of the States with Jessica Doherty. We've got someone from East Midlands with Leanne from BMC. And we've got someone from the east wing of Hursley A Block with Colin Penfold. And feedback from our previous event has suggested that there's an area of interest in hearing about security. So we've endeavoured to provide you with 3 experts in their own areas of security for this occasion. So I'll let the speakers introduce themselves, but I'd recommend you asking Colin about Elspeth from 26 years ago. It's not what you might think, and there's no hint of vulgarity, but it is quite an amusing story. After Leanne's session, we'll hold a general Q&A where you can ask questions and offer feedback and ideas. Now, on that topic of how do you talk to us, we've got the Slack channel, and we've been mentioning that. Slack channel is really good for long-lived questions where we can come back and give you answers at a later date. But we also, if you see near the bottom of your screen, have an Ask the Question area where you can ask questions. If you want to actually speak at the end when we have our Q&A, please put at the end of your question, happy to speak. And Abby, who you heard earlier on, will promote you so that you're able to voice your question. So I'm now going to hand over to Samantha Kapling, who is going to have a little bit of fun with you with some security questions, just as a little icebreaker. So Sam, would you like to take over?
Sure thing. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. We decided to do something slightly different this time. For those that have been to our other virtual Mainframers events, we've been using something called WebEx for a while, but we wanted to try and make it a little bit more exciting. And one of the things that we wanted to do was use a really fun app called Kahoot. So if anybody isn't familiar with it, it's basically, you need to go to a web browser and let me share my screen so you can see what's going on. There we go. We'll share this. So what you should see in front of you is a pin that says 6191651. If you put into your web browser www.kahoot.it, you should be able to get to a page where you can enter this pin and join the game. And then I can see the number of players coming in here. So I'll just leave you for a little bit to join. We have Purple Meerkat.
If I am the only person here, that is going to make it quite easy. So please do come and join me. I am Purple Meerkat. I love these.
They're brilliant.
Cheerful Yeti. Excellent. I love that.
Yeah. If you remember your code name, make sure you let us know at the end if you are the winner of the quiz, just so that we can highlight who you are. Great. I'll wait a little bit longer, as I think we have, how many people have we got? We've got 85 people on this call. Once we reach the 40s and the 50s, I'll get going. Oh, I quite like aquatic mouse. That's a good one.
I like Alex's suggestion in the chat that a lot of these would make really great names for IPAs.
Okay, we're getting into the 40s. So I'll give another 10 seconds, 10, 15 seconds for everybody else to join, and then we'll get started. Don't worry if you don't get the questions right. I didn't actually know the answers to a lot of these questions, so it's not a problem if you can't.
And also, if you don't join up straight away, you can join in halfway.
Yeah.
That's I did that with our last one.
Okay, let's get started. So this is the Mainframers Security and Cyber Protection session. So what is EU regulation 2016/679 better known as? We've got 2 answers. Last 3 seconds. Great. So majority of people got it. It is General Data Protection Regulation. And for those who don't know what GDPR is, it's basically an EU law that does data protection and privacy in the European Union and the European Economic Area. So it also addresses the transfer of data outside of this area as well. And I mean, for us, it's been for the last few years. Next question. Oh, we can see that Lucky Boa was the fastest to answer the correct answer. So well done to Lucky Boa. Next question. Why were we worried about a poodle in 2014? This one's a tough one. Three seconds. Great. So the majority of people got the correct answer, but this one was a really tough one. For those that don't know, POODLE actually stands for Padding Oracle on Downgraded Legacy Encryption, which was a vulnerability that allowed a man-in-the-middle attacker to decrypt ciphertext using a padding Oracle side channel attack. So POODLE affects older standards of encryption, and that's specifically SSL version 3. So Quick Koala has got into the lead. Well done. Next question. What is required for most elections since September 2019? Three seconds. And the answers are in. Yes. Strong authentication. That definitely seemed like everybody was clearly going for that one. Well done. And Flying Meerkat takes the lead. Well done. But Magic Lemming has the highest streak of answers. Well done. When did CICS first support SSL? Three seconds left. And the answer's in. Correct, 1997 in CICS version 1.2. That's when we first supported SSL. It's probably quite a relief that they do actually support it, and it has been supported for a while. Flying Meerkat still in the lead. Well done. And the final question. What percentage of breached organizations stated customer PII, also known as personally identifiable information, was compromised? Three seconds left. And the answers are in. It's a whopping 80%. So that's quite an interesting one. And perhaps we'll be exploring a little bit more about this later in some of the sessions. So let's see who's on the podium. There we go. Magic Lemon, Dazzled Seal, And in first place, Agent Seal. Well done. If you want to highlight on the channel that you are one of the winners, we'll definitely make an announcement. So please let us know who you are, because that's really good work. Perfect. So I will give you back to the host, Nick, and then you can take over.
Okay, we're now ready for the first presentation. So I'd like to hand over now to Jessica Doherty. Jessica, please enlighten us on data privacy.
So Jessica's just connecting, should be here in a second. So I'm quite pleased. I got 4 out of 5 on that one. I probably should have got 5 out of 5, seeing as how I knew a lot of the answers, but 4 out of 5, I'll take that.
I'm embarrassed I got the CICS one wrong.
So just waiting on Jessica.
Do we want to put Colin on?
Yes, let's sort out some connection issues offline. And Colin, I hope you're ready to be promoted. Here you are. Hopefully that will be a little bit quicker. We can sort out some connection issues with Jessica. And
I'm here.
Here's Colin.
Hello.
Running in to save the day.
Right. I will try and switch my presentation to share things.
So for those of you who don't already know him, Colin is the technical leader for CICS Security, and he's going to be talking about security by design in CICS. Hopefully you're going to learn something here. If you've got some questions, please do put them in the question box and we will get to them later on. Over to you, Colin.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
You can. Okay. Right, hello there. I'm Colin Penfold, and I've been working in CICS for 28 years and have been leading the security development for the last decade. In this 15-minute talk, I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour of CICS Security. Some old features, some new, to give you a flavour of what's available in CICS to assist you with securing your transactions and, most importantly, your data. So, what's the objective? Attacks are becoming more common. Not all attacks are from external agents such as Fancy Bear. Most of them are insider attacks. And there are many reasons for this. Sometimes it's a disgruntled employee, an opportunist, or even phishing attacks allowing an insider's machine to be taken over. And with COVID, greater working from home, this is a bit more of a risk as well. Also, with the outsourcing of code development, how can you be sure that the code does what you expect it to do? The basic principles are the same: zero trust. Know who should be using your application and only allow users what they need for their job. And make sure this can be audited. In this respect, the auditor is your friend. When designing or changing application programs, it's vital to consider security up front, not as an afterthought. Security is a lot easier to design in than to add on later. And with both design and test, think like a hacker. How could they abuse your system? For example, is any hashed in your application to save the cost of doing a secure each time? Hashing may seem a good idea at the time, but it may not be secure, and I've seen this in customer applications. Hackers don't just use the interfaces you intend. Just one security breach can be catastrophic. It can destroy a company's reputation, and no CEO wants to be interviewed on the Today programme about their breach. Good security costs, but bad security costs even more. Your data, your reputation, even your business. So, what
Colin,
are the options?
sorry,
What's the
just before
Yep.
we carry on, we're getting a little bit of feedback on your mic. Get a little bit further away
Okay.
from your mouse.
Is that better?
Much, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, using the latest hardware and software significantly improves your options for security. For those features that require configuration, choosing the right options for your requirements is the key to success. And as you can see below, CICS has many options for security, some of which have been in the product for many years, and some have been added more recently. And here's a sample of those that have been added in the last 8 releases. However, just because you may have some security options set for many years doesn't in itself make your system secure. The security landscape has changed over the years. So are your existing security settings still fit for purpose? From experience of reviewing customer configurations, this is not always the case. New compliance requirements may mean what you had in the past is no longer sufficient. When I started in security, security was considered an overhead, an afterthought. It's more important than ever that security is considered at the start of application development. So let's go through some of the options that CICS has introduced over the last decade to help you. First, let's consider the most basic aspect of security, identification. What user IDs are in your CICSplex? Originally, as in the top, things were very simple. Someone logged onto a terminal loading region, and the request ran into that user ID. But most working CICS systems doesn't come in that way nowadays. Most of it comes in remotely via web service requests or API requests, etc. It can also come in through Liberty, but I've only got 15 minutes, so I'm not considering Liberty in this presentation. After entry, there are many ways that a user ID can flow through the system. These all affect application design and auditing. You basically have 2 types of options. The individual end user could have a user ID which flows through the whole system, and alternatively, and very common, is the use of functional IDs. These are simple to set up, but this simplifies the setup, but at a cost. Because how do you know who has access to resource? How do you audit this? To audit properly, you need a combination of the remote systems auditing of a request and the same, combining that with the same request in CICS. So something to assist with this is an option that's been available since CICS version 4, distributed identity. Distributed identity support isn't used as in the top diagram. The identity of the remote client is lost when it comes into the CICSplex. Either the application server does its own mapping between the distributed identity and a specific RACF ID, or commonly a functional ID is used for all requests or a group of users. Using a functional ID will mean that CICS knows nothing about the end user. Auditing will special processing to tie up the requests from CICS and outside. Looking down below with the green part with distributed identity, the client's distributed ID is mapped in CICS by RACF to a RACF ID by some called a RAC map. This can be a one-to-one mapping or a many-to-one, so you can still use functional IDs if you wish. The important thing is security controls, the ACE, are associated with the distributed ID. Therefore, when the request is audited, the client's distributed ID is audited in the same request, in the same record throughout the CICSplex. So we've looked at identification and now for authentication. Of course, the 2 are very much related. CICS has many methods of authentication: passwords, passphrases, pass tickets, Kerberos certificates, but increasingly multi-factor authentication is required. CICS session interfaces, 3270, the WUI, the Explorer, all support MFA. But for stateless interfaces, it's more difficult, and you have 2 options. Either MFA authentication has to be done prior to entering CICS, in which case we're back to the trusted application server that we had in the previous foils. Alternatively, in the latest version of CICS, CICS TS5.6, we have a new option called Verified Token JWT. With this option, you can convert a user ID and an MFA token into a RACF generated identity token. This identity token is in the format of a JWT. The signed JWT has a claim specifying how the user authenticated to RACF. The token can be securely flowed back to the caller and used in further requests, possibly as a session cookie. The advantage of this mechanism is that the security control block, the ACE, identifies that the original user signed on using MFA. Therefore, in the audit records, you also have control information proving that MFA has been used, which, as shown in the quiz, is something that is necessary for certain customers. Authorization, what am I trying to protect? CICS has a number of configuration options for authorization, depending on how granular you need to go. Remember that the key requirement is what data do I need to protect and what do I need to do to secure it. The most basic form of authorization, and the one that's used by most customers, is transaction security, the XTrans SIT option. There is a danger in using this level of security, though, is it's quite coarse-grained for protecting data, as there's no checking on which resources the transaction can access. You're reliant on other mechanisms to ensure that the transaction doesn't access anything that it shouldn't. So in this particular case, you've got a transaction 1. In part of that transaction, file 1 and file 2 should be accessed. But file 3 and file 4 are also on the system, and that transaction could, in theory, access those systems. So you need another way of doing the protection. Either your development process has to ensure that there are no unwanted accesses, possibly through an independent code review of all changes. Note the independent in that is not just a code review. This could be quite challenging in a modern DevOps world. It's also difficult unless all code is developed in-house, which is often not the case nowadays. The alternative is to ensure that there's nothing in your CICS region that the transaction shouldn't access. Basically, if you're using this model and only using transaction security, you shouldn't mix low-value data with high-value data in the same region. Transaction security on its own may not be enough, and there are configuration options for CICS resources. You can choose which of the resources you want to protect. For example, you may just want to protect data resources, as in this example, where transaction 1 can access file 1 and file 2, but the users of that transaction can't access file 3 and file 4. Resource security is more granular than transaction security. If you have resource security, you can specify which transactions have the resource security, which is the ResSec option on transactions definitions. You must be careful, though, because if you want to use this, you have to ensure that you've got a rigorous policy of which transactions are protected and who defines this. If this is too complicated, then there's a SIT option, ResSec always, which will ensure that all resource checks are honoured. The other piece of the puzzle for authorization is the security definitions in RACF or other security manager. Here, good design is essential to make things are secure. At its most basic level, you define profiles to represent transactions or other resources. These can be generic, as in the top, or groups of transactions. Generics may seem the simplest way of doing things, but you have to use these with care because you have to be 100% rigorous in your naming conventions. This can be complicated if you don't have control of all those definitions. For example, you may have programs from various vendors that may not meet those conventions. And in addition, in many customers, they have had many company mergers that have brought other transactions into their systems with different naming conventions. So generally, the group method is a lot safer. In some applications, it's also desirable to have finer grained security than that's provided by CICS configuration. Customers have used a variety of ways of doing this fine-grained security, such as writing their own security controls. I've seen various ways of doing this, such as using files or DB2 to check authorization. Alternatively, you can use your own RACF profiles and use the query security command to do that. This has the advantage that all the security is defined in the same way as for the other security commands. However, RACF profiles may not be granular for what you're looking for. Whichever method you use, you have to be careful, though, with these application checks. With CICS security, auditing is relatively simple, but can you do that as well with your user-written security? And more importantly, prove it to an auditor. The more complex the security model is, the more likely it is that you've introduced a hole that a hacker can exploit. It's easy to check if you don't have authority. Checking that no one has authority that they shouldn't have is a lot harder. So finally, in this whistle-stop tour of CICS security, I'll talk about TLS. As was said in the original questions, CICS has been involved with TLS, or SSL as it used to be called, from a very early stage in 1997. As a consequence, some of the interfaces we've had to adapt since then. The old encryption equals strong, medium, weak that we put in right at the beginning is no longer valid when we move to TLS 1.2. And the two-digit ciphers that one originally defined in RDO are definitely not best practice now, as they can't be used to configure modern ciphers. Whilst we still have retained support for these for legacy reasons, they should be phased out. Instead, similar to other products, we've got a min TLS level parameter and an XML file to define ciphers. However, a better approach, even better approach, is to take a more radical approach, which is to take CICS completely out of the TLS picture and use something called application transparent TLS. If you use this, then CICS doesn't have to be involved in knowing anything about the TLS. However, there are some limitations, such as support for outbound authentication, but in general, ATTLS will simplify the TLS security administration. So that's my 15-minute summary of security in CICS, covering the very basics. The full presentation of these things takes about 6 hours, so it is a real small subset. The important message, though, is to consider your security setup up front when making changes. What am I trying to protect? Who should have access? And how do I prove it to an auditor? Keep things as simple as possible. If you don't understand it, it's probably not secure. And in testing, think like a hacker. More about that in a later presentation. With the overall objective, don't appear in the news. In the world of security, no news is good news.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Colin. And yes, you never want to be appearing on the news, do you?
Nope. Especially not CICS.
No.
For security. It would be the end of my career if I appear on the news.
So if anybody has questions for Colin, please pop them in the ask a question part. And remember, if you want to speak in person, then just say happy to speak there. Right, Colin, I'm just gonna get rid of your screen. And Jessica, we have Jessica back.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. And
So I know while we've been having a bit of a chat in the side chat about internet speeds, and I know Colin, you were saying earlier this week that the fibre you run on is cotton.
Yes, it's a string, I think, and
yes.
It's terrible when it gets wet. So apologies for that.
So and yes, I think Dave pointed out a very good point that this is our new normal that we're all having to get used to, and just very interesting to see what's possible with internet that we thought was absolutely fine, and then suddenly when we need to do some work on it, suddenly isn't fine. I know I've definitely found that with mine.
okay, so I am back. Let's
So, Colin, while you're still with us and we're just sorting out the screen share, Andy asked, do you have a handout on the topic that you presented with a similar overview?
Well, you've got the presentation.
There was some further significant footprinting, and anything higher than that could open the system up to an increased risk. Hopefully this chart shows you the flow you can go down for, again, heaps of footprinting information. So you've got the IEA-CIS XX, a member of PalmLib. So this member contains parameters and pointers that control the direction that the IPL takes, and this is full of sensitive information. We get the suffix from the output of IPL info, okay? If you remember, it was 00. And then from IEA-CIS 00, we can look at some other interesting members like ProgXX. We'll get the suffix for that from the IEA-CIS, which will list out the APF authorized libs. Again, I'm hoping that you can see what I mean, that this is all quite an interesting data gathering puzzle. Again, and also from the load XX, you can get the nuke list XX. Here are some ZOS commands that will also aid in footprinting. I won't go through them for the interest of time, but I just wanted to highlight that there are many avenues, which means we have many avenues that we may need to block. So if you do see the first command, again, it's another way that we can get a listing of the APF authorized libraries, okay? dspace prog, APF. Again, so we're building up that catalog of information. Okay, some other utilities that we can use. So ISR-DDN, this is a standard TSO utility. Again, once you go in there, you can go to different areas, and one of them will show you the APF authorized data sets. You can then sit there with your list of APF authorized libraries and see what you have access to. Do I have update? Can I exploit this? It's all about building up that process. We've got TAS ID, which is a system monitor that, again, is great for footprinting. MXI, again, another product for quick display of reams of information about your ZOS system, storage, DB2, CICS, and other subsystems. It is a commercial product, but there is still a free version out there, I believe, that you can get. Then we have RACF specific commands for listing data sets that we have access to. You know, searching for data sets and general resources that are in warning mode, which warning will then inherently give you alter access. Okay. Listing data sets of the APF authorized data sets. You know, do I have access to them? Do you have Z Secure, where you can run reports on RACF in sort of an easier and more digestible ISPF way, or, you know, outputting them to like report data sets? Okay. As a starter, if this is something that you were interested in, I've already shown you one way that we could start this through the IPL info chain, using display commands, etc. Okay, but again, this is another good way to start. Okay, list the ESM system settings. Okay, so that could be if it's RACF, you know, doing a RACF set drops. If it's ACF2, go and have a look at the GSO options. If it's top secret, go and have a look in the TSS Palm. Okay, depending on what ESM you have, look at the profiles that you have access to. To the side of that, get a list of all the APF libraries, the linked list, the PalmLibs and the ProcLib datasets. Do you have access to any of those? And then also at what level? Okay, to summarize, be patient. This can be a long game of footprinting, connecting dots, following flows, figuring out puzzles until you find that chink in the armor. Do it quietly. It's more fun that way. Try not to get caught out. Don't change anything on a running production system. Remember, you are one of the good guys as a pen tester. You're not a hacker. So if you can use a test system, use it and practice, practice, practice. Okay, I've shown you a few resources and a few avenues that will hopefully get you starting to poke around the systems to aid in that footprinting, which would then hopefully lead to, well, not hopefully, maybe being able to exploit a vulnerability that's in the system. You know, if you do find them, okay, as a pen tester, you know, what we would then do is we would take that vulnerability, you would write it up, and then we would remediate it. So that avenue is then closed off for hackers in the future. So yeah, hopefully there's a few resources there and a few avenues that will hopefully get you started if this is an area of interest. That's all I have, I'm afraid. When I ran through that, it took about 20 minutes. I feel like I might have zoomed through that under panic.
Thanks ever so much, Leanne. You kept us to time, so that's a good thing.
Okay.
Any questions for Leanne, please put them in the channel, either on the Slack channel, or you can use the Ask a Question tab at the bottom of the screen there. And quick reminder before we go to the Q&A, if you fancy getting involved, we've had a couple of people suggesting sessions or offering sessions. It's not a huge commitment, and it would be great to get some new blood in here, some outsider thoughts, so that we don't just throw IBM stuff down at you all the time. Leanne's a great example of that from BMC. So please get in contact if you feel like joining us. So I'll say thank you for attending for now, but we have a bunch of questions that have come in. I'll make a start. Jessica, we've had a couple for you.
Sorry, Nick, I need to get rid of your screen so Jessica can come on screen.
Okay.
So hopefully that's going to work, and she'll be with us in a second.
Okay.
Do you have a question for somebody else while she's getting set up?
Yeah, Colin. So the question is, Colin, how did you first get interested in security on the mainframe?
Well, I started many years ago, back in the mid-70s, when I was writing game software, and it took up most of the university's resource. So the lecturers tried to kick us off the system. So I had to find ways of getting us back on the system, which was by doing the stuff that Soldier of Fortran was mentioned by one of the people. So as to find my way past the lecturers, basically.
So it was an education, you might.
It was an education, yes. Let's see whether we can do things on a mainframe that you shouldn't be able to do on a mainframe, so as to gain advantage over the lecturers.
Well, as
that
Leanne,
the company that made that mainframe is now out of business, by the way.
Right. and as Leanne pointed out, the mainframe is hackable, albeit perhaps a bit more difficult than other platforms. But so, Leanne, all of these commands which we're issuing for tracking, should we keep a benchmark to compare against? Would you suggest that all the commands should be compared to a benchmark value?
Yes, I would say so. I mean, sort of best practice out there would sort of define different RACF classes and profiles to protect the ability to issue certain operator commands, SDSF commands, etc. And I know we as BMC software have our best practice. I'm sure if you do some Googling out there and look at some different resources, you'll, as I showed you, there's so much out there that you can learn from, that you could take them and then make what you think would be your own set for your own sites.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you. Have we got Jessica online now? Abby?
Not quite, not quite.
Okay.
I think we're having some issues. By the way, you can all share your videos again if you like, then people can see things. 'Cause at the moment we've just got a grey screen.
I'll stick with the questions. Colin, you're a popular chap. Thinking of RACF as an example, I find mainframe security to be really complicated, full of difficult terminology requiring experts to understand and implement. Is there an easy way for someone new to get started? That's a good question, actually. It's a good skills question as well.
That is very good. It is one of the things that over the sort of 50 years that we've had some of the mainframes, CICS, and slightly shorter for RACF, I think. The documentation, I think, has evolved over that time, and it's, I think, a duty of some of us to try and reduce that complexity. I don't think there is an easy way into it other than really practice with some of the basics. So some of the stuff that I have presented today, you've got some basics. If you've got a system to play that on, try that on, play around with those basic things before you get into the more exotic stuff. So it is really a question of trying things out and seeing what you can do with the various security settings. But you do need a machine to practice on to be able to learn this.
Okay, thank you. Leanne, I think this one's probably for you, and it's really pertinent to the way we're working today with open source. So the question is, how do you know which open source tools can be trusted for this? Do you have a go-to list of useful tools to use? Is there checklists or whatever? Is that?
Well, with sort of code like that, I mean, really you'd want to do sort of vulnerability scans across it to really get an in-depth look at actually what the code's doing and seeing if it's leaving you any ability to actually elevate anything. So that's what I'd recommend in that instance, would be doing a full sort of vulnerability scan against any third-party products, so freeware, etc., and see what the output is. You might be surprised.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's very good advice. I'm told we have Jessica back. So Jessica, we've got a couple of questions specifically for you. Do you have to have a Z15 to use data privacy passports?
Hi, yes, you do. You either need to have a Z15 or Linux 1.3 available to you to use data privacy passports.
Okay. And the privacy hub sounds like it's similar to the encryption and access control of row and column level security on a Postgre SQL database. Is it essentially a proxy in front of RDBMS?
So I have not looked at the Colin Postgres SQL. Right. From what the description that Peter put in the chat, it does sound like they are similar. From talking to clients, the differentiator between the Privacy Hub or data privacy passports and other tools is that you can use, you're not just limited to one system where the data can either come from or is targeted to go to. So that is something above and beyond what you would get if it was something, if the solution was just running on one system, protecting data on that system alone.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. So Leanne, here's one for you. You probably have to protect names here, be suitably vague. Dare I ask, can you share any mainframe pen testing war stories? Any surprising situations you found yourself in?
there have been a few instances where the time to actually exploit the system has been less than 15 minutes for some of the folks in our organisation. Surprisingly, one of the biggest ways that I've found a way to get in would be finding copies of RACF databases lying around the systems. People are very keen to protect their RACF database, but forget that they make copies for lots of different reasons, and they haven't protected those.
Right.
So cracking the copy, which was a recent copy, and then essentially finding a user ID that was already elevated and taking control of that user. So that there are many ways, which is one of my biggest interests in penetration testing. Really, is the fact that there are just so many different avenues to it and things you need to look at, and it is such a long game of trying to tinker and play with anything you can do to try and exploit the system.
Yeah. Okay. Understand. Thank you. We've gone past the top of the hour, so we'll have one last question. I've seen one put here that I think is probably for everyone. So if you just give a 1 or 2 sentence response, I'd appreciate it. So the question is, what do you think will be the biggest challenge to security and protection on the mainframe in the next 10 years?
Shall I start?
Go, Colin.
Quantum computing.
Quantum, right.
Because you're talking about being able to get a copy of the RACF database and break into things. With a quantum algorithm, that may be quicker, and ditto other things. So quantum computing.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go.
Oh, I liked that quantum one. I don't know if I can beat it. I will say that a lot of the questions that we've been getting have been around things like GDPR and other types of regulations that we all have to adhere to. Even being home because of COVID and COVID, the coronavirus, we're learning how to work in different ways. Data is being, the mainframe is being accessed by different points today than it was, back in February of this year, and learning how to make sure that we protect against this new way of working, I think is challenging, and that we have to start to look at when you have people coming through the firewall, coming maybe through a VPN, through their home networks, how do we protect the mainframe on the back end?
I think the whole COVID situation has just opened up in a variety of areas, just a lot of exposures that we possibly never thought of before.
Yeah, because we're, like just putting holes into that firewall that was there before that, no longer is.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, I've been asked to stop sharing, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen because we're about to add someone else. In fact, I think the Uber controller here has removed my screen. So.
Oh yes, I do have the ultimate power. So Andrew is currently connecting, and he's got a question that he wanted to ask. So hopefully he's going to be here in a second.
And he stuck a sneaky question in anyway in the Q&A around mobile phones. So Colin, that's a point and I know this isn't necessarily a CICS discussion, but CICS has with its tokens and certificates, a sort of isolation from the potential with mobile technology, doesn't it?
Well, you would normally put something in front of CICS before you get mobiles coming straight in. We don't tend to have applications going straight into CICS from clients. They would go through something like data power or some previous application server. But you do have most of the sort of protection mechanisms, either the certificates or if you're going through Liberty, JWT and things like that, all of the modern techniques can be used through CICS.
Thanks, Colin. So, Abby, is Andrew going to join?
Sorry, my mute was very slow to come off there. So his status is accepted and connected. So I think it's all an internet game at the moment.
Wow.
We haven't been very lucky with our internet connection.
Come on. Hello.
I think you answered my question anyway. I was going to ask one second question, slightly off topic, which was around Connect Direct security when you send files between various platforms and how your data passports can protect it, or if they can protect it.
Today we can protect data using JDBC connections. So DB2, IMS, VSAM can be protected using DBM in between. I have to check with the development team if Connect Direct is still on the roadmap and how we are integrating with them, if at all yet. So, is that something that you're interested in?
The last project I was on, we was using Connect Direct. And where it's being used in India, they weren't really familiar with the issues, the errors, security. And I just wondered how, when you send the files across, you can make them more secure for maybe a less experienced or less maybe aware security on the other side. We're obviously sending some secure data across in Connect Direct. And the team that were picking it up in India weren't really overly familiar with Connect Direct, the issues they were seeing, and it just made me question how secure my transfers are being, especially when I'm sending mainframe off host, sort of Windows or servers. How secure is my transfer? Can I protect my transfer from when I send it, and is it protected at the other end on the receiving side?
So if you were to send data from the mainframe using data privacy passports to your colleagues in India, and they were working on Windows, what you could do is, if you were looking at a DB2 table, you could protect different columns in the table in the sense that you could mask them or hash them for what you didn't need your colleagues in India to see. But if you needed them to be able to unencrypt at a later point in time, you would have to give them access to the privacy hub to be able to ask the question, be able to ask the question, do I have access?
Thank you.
Okay, if that's it, I think we're 10 minutes over, so I think it's probably time to bring this to a close. I hope everyone found value. Hello?
Oh, I was just saying yes, I think so. We're a little bit over time.
Okay, overtime. God, I remember that. No, thank you all for joining. Hope you got value from it. Please, if you want to get involved, get in contact. If there's a topic you'd like us to talk about, let us know what that topic might be. If you fancy presenting, we've had a couple of people saying that they do have some ideas, then we'd love to hear from you. So with that, this is Nick Garrett saying good night.